Cops unleashed their canines on a young mother clutching her newborn. Everyone braced for tragedy. But the second she opened her mouth, the dogs froze. What happened next exposed a shocking truth about her past, leaving the officers humiliated and the entire crowd in stunned silence. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The afternoon sun warmed the quiet neighborhood as Jasmine strolled down the sidewalk, cradling her newborn against her chest. For once, life felt calm, just her baby, and the promise of a peaceful walk. But the calm shattered when police cruisers screeched to a halt nearby. Doors slammed, radios crackled, and two officers stepped out, their hands already tense on leashes. Snarling barks pierced the air as their canines strained forward, teeth bared, eyes locked on Jasmine. She froze, clutching her child tighter. Confusion turned to terror as the command was shouted, "Release." The dogs lunged and the world seemed to stop. The sound was deafening, chains rattling, claws scraping against the pavement, and guttural snarls tearing through the air. The two German shepherds surged forward with explosive power, muscles coiled like springs released. Their bared teeth gleamed in the sunlight, and foam flecked at their mouths as they closed the distance. Gasps erupted from nearby porches. A woman screamed. Someone pulled out a phone, recording the horrifying scene. Jasmine's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she instinctively dropped to her knees, wrapping her body around her newborn. She pressed the baby close, whispering desperate promises. "I've got you. Mommy's got you." The dogs were seconds away now, their shadows stretching over her trembling figure. The officers tightened their grips, but the animals were too strong, dragging them forward. To everyone watching, disaster was inevitable. A mother and child were about to be torn apart, unless something unimaginable happened. But just as the dogs leapt within striking distance, Jasmine did something no one expected. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she lifted her head, eyes blazing with authority, and unleashed a single commanding word, sharp, clipped, and unmistakably trained. The effect was instant. Both canines skidded to a halt, claws digging into the grass, their snarls faltering. Confusion flickered in their eyes as they stood frozen, muscles taut, awaiting further instruction. The crowd gasped, disbelief spreading like wildfire. Jasmine rose slowly to her feet, still shielding her baby with one arm, her other hand extended in quiet control. Another word left her lips, calm yet firm. The shepherds lowered their heads, ears twitching, as though recognizing an authority greater than the handlers behind them. The officers shouted in frustration, yanking at the leashes, but the dogs no longer obeyed them. All eyes turned to Jasmine. How had she done this? The stunned silence around her seemed to trigger memories buried deep in Jasmine's mind. As the dogs crouched low, their ears twitching at her voice, she was no longer standing on a suburban lawn. She was back in the desert heat of a foreign war zone. Years earlier, Jasmine had been one of the military's finest canine handlers. Day after day, she worked side by side with combat dogs, training them to detect explosives, track enemies, and protect soldiers in the field. The bond was unbreakable. A handler's voice could mean the difference between chaos and survival. She remembered the long nights, the endless drills, the loyalty in those sharp canine eyes. But she had walked away from it all when her service ended, choosing family over war. Now fate had dragged her past into the present. These police dogs didn't just see a stranger, they recognized a leader. Back in the present, Jasmine squared her shoulders, her voice steady despite the panic buzzing around her. She shifted, her baby carefully against her chest, then barked a second command. One sharp, unmistakable syllable. The German shepherds instantly dropped into a rigid sit, their ears perked, eyes locked on her with unwavering focus. Their snarls melted into silence. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. The officers yanked hard at the leashes, shouting their own commands, but the dogs refused to budge. They only obeyed Jasmine, their posture now alert yet submissive, as though awaiting her orders. Jasmine's gaze never wavered. She took a cautious step forward, her baby safe in her arms, her voice carrying a calm authority that rolled across the tense street. It was the kind of control only years of trust and training could forge, and it left the officers pale with disbelief. The officers' faces burned red with frustration as the crowd whispered and filmed every moment. One of them stormed toward Jasmine, pointing a finger. "What did you do to them? Why won't they listen?" His voice cracked with anger, but beneath it was something else, fear. Jasmine stood tall, rocking her baby gently against her chest. "They're following training," she said evenly. "Training you clearly don't understand." The officer scoffed. "Don't play games. These are highly trained canines. They don't just ignore their handlers." But the proof sat right at Jasmine's feet. Two shepherds obediently still, eyes glued to her every move. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, people calling out, "She's controlling them!" And, "She knows what she's doing." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their authority slipping with every second. Jasmine's calm defiance made it clear she wasn't the one cornered here. They were. Phones were everywhere now, raised high, recording every second as the scene unfolded. Dozens of eyes watched in disbelief as the two police dogs ignored their official handlers and sat obediently before Jasmine, who stood calm with her newborn in her arms. "What's going on?" someone shouted from across the street. "Why, are the dogs listening to her?" Another voice chimed in. "Leave that woman alone, she's not the threat here." The officers grew restless under the mounting pressure. Every command they barked was drowned out by the crowd's murmurs and the sight of their canines locked on Jasmine. The shepherds looked neither aggressive nor confused. They looked loyal, as though they had chosen their true leader. Jasmine's grip on her child tightened, but her voice never wavered. She gave another command and the dogs immediately shifted, lying flat on the ground in perfect unison. Gasps swept through the bystanders, followed by scattered applause. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The people weren't looking at the police anymore, they were looking at Jasmine with awe. The tension that had once threatened her life was now unraveling, exposing a truth no one expected. This woman had more authority over the K9s than the officers themselves. One officer finally snapped. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice strained as the crowd pressed closer. "What trick are you pulling?" Jasmine's eyes hardened. She shifted her baby gently in her arms, then spoke with quiet force. "No trick. I'm a former military K9 handler. These dogs recognize discipline, respect, and a leader's voice. That's something you can't fake." The words hit like a thunderclap. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers, phones zooming in, recording her every syllable. The officers faltered, disbelief etched across their faces. Jasmine continued, her tone steady but sharp. "I trained alongside dogs just like these in combat zones overseas. We depended on each other to survive. I know how they think, how they move, and how to command them. That's why they listened, not to you, but to me." The German shepherds remained perfectly still, eyes glued to her, tails low in submission. The crowd erupted in stunned chatter. "She's military," someone shouted. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The officer's authority crumbled beneath the weight of truth. What had begun as a show of intimidation had backfired spectacularly. In the eyes of everyone watching, Jasmine was no victim. She was the one in control. The street was silent except for the steady panting of the two canines, sitting calmly at Jasmine's feet as though they had been hers all along. The officers, red-faced and rattled, struggled to pull the dogs away, but the shepherds refused to break eye contact with her. Jasmine raised her free hand, delivering a final command. Instantly, the dogs shifted to a perfect heel beside her, obedient and composed. Gasps rippled through the crowd once more. An older man in the crowd called out, "She's not the one who needs training. They are." Applause and shouts of support followed, drowning out the officers' protests. For the first time since the confrontation began, Jasmine allowed herself a small, steady breath. She pressed a gentle kiss to her baby's forehead, standing tall. No badge, no uniform, yet she had earned the only thing that mattered: respect.